G'day guys, another Sunday together. Good to see you all. Now let me just go through there. Jared's somewhere around. He's probably preparing his steak or something, or yeah. So we'll have to wait for him to appear. G'day Kitty. I love that image, Luke. I had to put it up at the end, you know, because Pim sort of missed it. I had caffeine intake. I've basically zero tolerance. Oh. So did you spend some time somewhere, you know? Anyway, we won't go into that. Yes. Holy moly. G'day, Gusto. Go through some of these. I didn't notice that. I just did. Damn, some of the comments. Me as a propagandist? Take off your alcohol. Nice one. Oops. I have to bypass mine because you guys have seen them. Yes, it was fun today to I'm going to get feedback, aren't I? That's see Pim and Bart together. It's been a while. Bart in his leathers. Shell. Nice one, Shell. Get your snacks and drinks together. G'day, Harold. I'll just put these up for a while. I'll just cycle through a couple of these and then we'll try and get to some questions while we're still waiting for Jared to appear, or uncle for some, or or grandpa for some. Yeah, loved it, mate. Yes. Sort of that could be his new sort of a meat militia sort of image. I'm taking out the actual veg tards. That'd be a good one for a t-shirt, you know. He could have, you know, I mean, he needs to be a bit more creative with his t-shirts. A bit of that comedy side of thing as well. We need to sort of push that on him. Oh, look, thanks. You know, it's Knocklofty sort of reserve up there is a really nice area, which isn't too far from the centre of this, well, from where I live anyway. But even from the centre, it's only, what is it, about 25 minute walk, depending on your I usually walk quite fast. I have a sort of like my father, sort of a high speed sort of movement. Most of my friends usually say, do you actually walk or do you run when you're walking? So I sort of have this really high tempo pace, but it's not very far. I mean, even if you were to walk slowly, it's not very far to get to the area. The only thing is it's steep, so you sort of. But once you get there, there's a few areas that are a bit elevated, but otherwise, it's just bloody great. Here he is. G'day, mate.
Hello.
Just talking about that walk that I did up through Knocklofty Reserve in my city.
Oh, I didn't see.
Oh, you haven't seen that video? Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so what the hell was this? We'll come back to that. Yeah, so it's a beautiful place in Hobart. I sort of did a walk. I haven't done a walk up that way because I usually go the other way because I have to keep it within the constraints of a certain hour in my lunch, which is when I do my walks. So I usually always power up the hill to the top of the mountain, and well, it's not exactly right to the top; it's just slightly below. But by the time I come right back down, it's usually takes me an hour to do. So the first half is just all uphill. It's just basically, yes, let's say fun. You could put it one way. So it's high intensity uphill.
Front-loaded work.
What's that?
Front-loaded work, so you get to enjoy it after the first half.
Oh, look, it doesn't. It actually doesn't take me if I do a bit of jogging in between, because there's a couple of spots there which are not as steep, and I do a bit of jogging, like interval cardio type thing. I usually am up there at about within 15 to 20 minutes, depending on my speed or how lazy I am on that day. But I usually don't come straight down. I used to and just jog straight down. But I think because it's in some areas it's quite steep, it puts a lot of strain on your joints, which isn't probably a good thing. So I usually go down the back way, which goes into Lena Valley, which people know if they live in Hobart, and come through Augusta Road that way, or go through some of the other streets and go right into Newtown and then come through the main sort of street. But, depending if I want to do a slightly longer walk, it always depends which roads I take. But there are a lot of areas around Hobart which are really nice. I do want to do one on the waterfront and just go through and also just show some of the companies there that are on the actual docks that actually sell all this locally produced sort of seafood. So I want to do something like that, just go through and actually show the guy that actually he's got all these, oysters packed up like a mountain high, and he's just going through them and just opening them up and putting them into trays. So it's quite interesting for people to see the sort of produce we've got down here. But yes, let's get on with this. Well, first, SpaceX has launched the first vegan into space. Have they? God damn.
Was one of the crew on that flight vegan? I didn't know that. I'm not sure if that's
no,
true.
Neither did I. I've got no idea. Yes. With some of the stuff that gets put on, who knows? Do not know.
So before we get going, I have about an hour that I'll put in for the stream tonight. That's why I'm eating my dinner right now, so I can be here.
That's fine.
Have to go.
Not a problem. You do what you needed to do. Yep, they were pretty good. It's been a while since they've been together.
Yeah, that was the original format when they first started streaming. I kind of like it that way. I'll take my taurine at my age, synthesis goes down.
Not yet. You're still relatively young, in your 30s.
No, I was playing the grandpa character.
Oh, that's true. Oh, Yeah, you do need your taurine then.
I've got some beautiful scrambled eggs this evening, though. I mean, I'm having steak and eggs and brie and milk, and the eggs, the chickens just went out on pasture, and they're really, really,
Sounds
really
bloody good.
Well, the
Looks
light's kind of
good.
blowing them out, but they're like a school bus yellow orange color.
That does look nice. Carbs to the so Augusto's asking, what do I think about adding some carbs to the diet once a week? Or, I mean, if you're consuming milk or raw milk, you're actually getting some carbs. So, in that sense, I'm basically adding carbs every day, but a very small amount.
Here's that.
Exactly. So, at the end of the day, galactose goes through 4 stages to end up as glucose, and glucose from galactose tends to be lower in deuterium, one thing, but also on the other side is also, glucose it doesn't cause as much inflammation in the body. It doesn't cause a lot of advanced glycation end products, AGEs as they're called, or AGEs, for the simple reason it's fructose that really causes it. It's refined sugars and stuff like that are really the nasty sort of stuff. I mean, even glucose, it's very low. It's less than a percentage. It's 0.8%. So you have to consume quite a lot of glucose before you get a lot of glycation. But it's not optimal, and you can engage the Randall cycle. So you can actually cause a lot of circulating. So this is the problem. When you actually engage the Randall cycle and you end up having a lot of fats and sugars circulating, that's when you can have far more glycation. So if you're, on the other hand, not having, you're not engaging the Randall cycle, less of an issue. If you're not mixing your macros, also less of an issue, because if you're just consuming primarily fat, then you're upregulating those fat oxidating pathways, enzymatic pathways. So you're reducing the potential of getting into inducing that sort of Randall cycle and having, but it's not even, let's say you really go crazy on fat and you can actually get to a level where you can get beyond your threshold when you're literally frothing at the mouth in terms of fat in what you're putting in there. Okay. So let's say then your cells are going to go, well, they're going to get slightly resistant, say, look, we're going to hold off on this and allow it to circulate. It's fat. Circulating fat's not going to cause a problem as long as it's not oxidized. So it's not an issue.
Right. So it's similar with the residence time for lipids in your bloodstream. Right?
Exactly. So when you've got if you've got low residence time, so let's say you're on a plant-based diet, which is and you're very high sugar. It can still be catabolic and you can still burn through. You may not be getting enough calories from all that sugar that you're consuming, especially if you're physically active, and you can burn right through without even hitting the Randall cycle, or hitting that sort of where your body's got too much excess energy. But even if you've got some excess energy, that'll just circulate around, and if it's glucose, it's not going to be much of a problem. If it's sugar, then it can be a problem, because sugar, fructose is something like 3.75%, or I think it's around about there, from memory. So it is, in orders of magnitude, it's massive in orders of magnitude in terms of glycating capacity. And usually people are consuming a lot of sugar with fats, so they're engaging a Randall cycle at a much higher gradients, and that's what's causing a lot of the problems. So but the problem with sugar-based diets, you may not, even though you may not be engaging the Randall cycle to the same, or even causing the same level of glycation that the standard diet would cause, because of you're keeping that stuff longer time in resident within the bloodstream to cause more glycation, where if you're on either low fat or low carb, those two extremes, you'll basically have less resident time of those macronutrients that are floating around as energy. And that's important. That lower resident time, lower capacity to cause advanced glycation end products. But there's a difference between fat and sugar, and the difference is that one is, nutrient. It's full of fat-soluble vitamins and far more important nutrients that the body needs. The body doesn't need sugar, but it definitely needs fat for both structural material and for energy. So it has a dual purpose, and it includes a lot of fat-soluble vitamins that are part of that food, which is really important for your, for your hormones, for everything in your body. And that's why, while the other vegan type diets are not as damaging in terms of the advanced glycation end products that you would get from a standard diet, they are still quite deficient, nutrient deficient, and over time they'll create all sorts of B12 and all sorts of other deficiencies. Plus, if you've got shitload poor conversion capacity in terms of beta carotene, or you've got piss poor conversion or issues with choline synthesis and choline methylation issues, which I have, which a lot of people in Europe have, then you're going to have you're going to come up against a whole lot of problems. So that's the sort of side, the way you have to sort of view it. But in terms of having some carbs from an animal source like milk, not a problem. Having some glucose now and then from other sources like yams and stuff like that, it's not going to be a problem. It's not optimal, but it's not going to be a problem, but when you're actually looking at putting certain amount of calories into your mouth every day, you really need to, measure what the nutrient, like Jared is, like Grandpa's doing right now, getting.
Oh, Grandpa.
Yes, that would be a real good T-shirt. Exactly, Luke. You agree with me. Good to hear. Go ahead. Some of the comments. Do you walk or run? Look, my sort of pace can be quite high tempo. So Dad, I take after Dad because Dad had a very high tempo, used to annoy my mum at no ends. And yes. And so, yeah, I get the same from my partner as well. She doesn't like me walking, so I actually walk on my own because I could actually walk at my tempo. So it's simple as that. So okay, let me just try and get to some questions because there's a lot of hellos and everything else.
I'm similarly quite a fast walker because of my dad. I used to walk out all over the place with him as a kid when going to the store and such, and he would always offer to slow down for me because I was only little, and I would always insist on trying to keep up with him. And so now I walk quite quickly, habitually.
Yeah, I'm like that, and I sort of annoy both friends and family in that regard. So yeah, what can you do? Yes, unfortunately, it does. Yeah, it's sort of the current paradigm we live in. Yeah, I sort of need a bit of my hair to be cut. It's getting a bit too long and a bit too shabby, and I did try to straighten it down as much today to sort of contain it, so it didn't look as bad because it can get really fuzzy. I didn't even dare to touch almost any carbs at all. LDL 1.2, I think that's what it is. Look, I wouldn't even waste my time with you're gonna, yeah, just go. You were gonna make a comment.
Oh, I was just gonna joke about my high cholesterol with him. His LDL, your LDL alone is 12. I assume that's in millimole per liter. Even still, yeah, I wouldn't put too much weight on the numbers.
Yep. Yeah, because the other one there, the HDL is 2.2. I suspect it's millimoles. Yeah,
I'm assuming that's
and try
12.
And yeah, no, that's only LDL and HDL. She hasn't
okay.
put total, but she's put trigs, and that's the sort of level of trigs that I get in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is, and many people get much higher than that. I remember when I had my heart condition, I had 1.7,
Yep.
which is considered okay by the medical establishment. 1.7. It's usually considered above, like 2 and above and all that being a problem. So, yeah, a bit of a quit. But now it's usually below 1.
My last blood work was almost a year ago at this point, so I'm not going to put too much stock in it.
Yeah, look, mine is so long ago, and it was 0.58, that I'm not going to, because it's next to, and I don't bother. It's unimportant. I've realised, yep, that was 12, which is, so you're a hyper responder. That's basically it. That's all you are.
So my triglycerides were 1, but which is at the kind of like upper threshold for what most people would consider to be a healthy range, I guess, even in low carb. But again, coming back to the residence time, without having tested with more nuance on the lipids like that, I would assume that it's just energy being transported where it needs to go.
Yeah, look, that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, that most of that stuff is just, well, it's a bit unimportant. We're just wasting, your lipid system knows it's evolved over thousands or millions of years. It knows what it's doing. We shouldn't interfere with it at all. If you're eating a species appropriate diet, your lipids will go to the range where they should go naturally. If you're not, you're going to get certain abnormalities in certain, and usually if you're on low carb, keto, carnivore, paleo type diet, you usually have, your LDL type is A's and B's. It's not, it's the 1s and 2s. So it's the large fluffy ones, as they call it. Some of it, it's not really large. It's just slightly a few microns, just slightly bigger than the other, but it's completely unimportant as long as it's, not the oxidized stuff or the stuff that's that will, and usually the smaller, what they call atherogenic, it's not smaller, it's because of glycation and damage to the receptor that happens, that it ends up staying in residence for so long that it gets damaged more and more. So the more you have a resident time that it stays in there, because of you're eating a lot of refined sugars and stuff like that, you're damaging the receptors on the LDL. It remains in residence because it can't be, taken up by the liver through the LDL receptor, and you're assaulting it with a standard diet with more sugar and more sugar. It gets more glycated, more damage, and becomes, more, this small LDL, as they call it. So it's really it's not a natural process. It's an unnatural process caused due to higher levels of glycation and oxidation, or lipid peroxidation, which is from PUFAs that are in the diet. So that's what's really driving these sort of abnormal lipids. They're not native or natural sort of states for the lipids. It's just these unnatural things. And you can do these special tests which can show you that, but why bother? I mean, you know what's causing it. Just don't eat the shit and you won't have the problem. And you don't need to test at all. You know.
Yeah, that's kind of my thinking.
Yeah. We waste too much time, money and time on these things.
Yeah, and I mean, unless you're paying out of pocket all the time for blood work, it's sort of a headache having to consult with a doctor about the results all the time, or asking a doctor to order it, because then they're going to try to, put you on a statin or try to artificially lower your cholesterol in some way.
Yep. Good for you. I would have to say that, yep. I'm not recommending cigarettes, but PUFA is definitely worse. You know, you can have a cigarette and your body will detox that within, the next couple of days. You take some PUFA and incorporate that into your tissues or into your fat stores, to get rid of that, it can take anywhere between 4 to 6 years. So not worth it. Not worth it at all. So that's how nasty it is. So you definitely want to keep away from that sort of stuff. My brain is 40% of my body's cholesterol. I don't want to lower my brain on statins. No thanks. Precisely. And all your tissue around your body, all your basically your hormones, all the fat soluble vitamins, all these things require cholesterol. You can't synthesize vitamin D. You can sit out in the sun as long as you like. If you don't have enough cholesterol in your diet, you're going to have issues. You seem to know a lot about other people's habits. Yes, probably I wouldn't recommend 50 cigarettes. It's quite even when I was smoking, I used to consume about 25 cigarettes a day, and then I lowered it to 10. And then after that, I was able to get off smoking altogether. But that was, what is it now? 2 decades ago when I stopped. Well, actually not 2 decades. It's nearly 2 decades ago. It's about 17 or 18 years. I can't remember now. So far back. I'll have to ask my mate Sean when we actually stopped, because we stopped together. And so we sort of kept each other honest from deviating.
And both of you are still non-smokers?
He occasionally will have the occasional one now and then. In recent times, he's only done that, but he doesn't he doesn't go and buy cigarettes. So if somebody's there and somebody's smoking, he may grab one off them, in a sort of a social setting, but he won't do it. He doesn't do it on a regular basis, which is fine. I mean, there's plenty long-lived people that smoked. As long as you've got good detoxification pathways, I mean, my issue doesn't come from smoking. I just gave up smoking because it was one, who needs it? It's become very expensive in Australia as well. To buy a packet of cigarettes, it's so highly taxed in Australia. It's just.
It's similar in Canada. I wouldn't be able to afford to start smoking if I wanted to.
Precisely. It's just expensive. It's a waste of a lot of good money. Could be used for other things. I mean, when I'm actually sometimes in Asia, I'll occasionally on special occasions go and buy myself cigars, some Cuban cigars, and actually smoke one of those. So, I don't hate, I don't demonize smoking. I don't think it's good for your health. but you know, it's definitely far better. It's not as nasty as PUFA. Good to hear. Yes.
I wish it had been that long for me. It's only been about
Yes,
almost
we do.
2 years, I guess.
Yes, we take the piss out of each other. That is true. Not that sort of piss. Yeah, look, for me, it took 3 weeks. Actually, even less than 3 weeks, because we had a supply. It's probably about the transition. The transition would have been. It was just slightly over, nearly 3 weeks, where I stop having all these associations. But I front loaded the whole effect. Like, I would go into certain shops at specific times deliberately to break the associations. And I can tell you, those first couple of days going into those shops at those specific times, which made me thought coming out, I need to light up, because that thought would immediately come. There was an association, and I did that for that first week, which, let's say, was hard on me. But what it did was it allowed me to just break those associations. And it was much easier after that to just keep away from it, because I wasn't having these constant reminders. I need to smoke coming into my head, which is quite annoying, as most smokers know.
Sort of exposure therapy, to put yourself in a situation where you know you're going to want to smoke repeatedly, and then you don't want to.
Exactly, and the best way to do it is leave your wallet. Don't take your wallet with you, because you've got no money to purchase anything anyway. So
yeah, I've always sort of pondered laws that prohibit selling single cigarettes. That if you're pro quitting, wouldn't you want to be able to buy less than a pack at a time?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Look, so it depends. Some people, I wouldn't call myself. I'm able to have not a cigarette, but like a cigar or something like that, and I won't sort of fall off the wagon, so to speak, and go back to it. But it's it depends. There are differences in that regard. Look, I haven't had since the lockdown. I haven't had a drink since then.
Yeah, it's
so I used to have a social drink, but
I enjoy drinking socially. It's a nice way to get to know somebody. It's a nice activity to do with a friend once in a while, especially if it's someone you haven't seen in a while or something, especially if you don't do it every night, obviously.
Exactly.
But I just, since going carnivore and getting a little bit more sensitive to how I feel from what I eat, I have not been able to find alcohol that doesn't just make me feel like absolute crap. Even while I'm drinking it, it's not even like an enjoy it tonight and feel bad tomorrow kind of thing. It's like enjoy it for an hour and then feel bad in 90 minutes. It's
look, I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy it like I used to. And when I do go out on social occasions, I don't even buy beer anymore.
No.
I find it. Yeah, they can.
She's behind the microphone.
Yeah, I don't even. Like yourself, I'm far more sensitive to the taste now than what I used to be. But the only thing that I can cope is with a low sugar cider. That I sort of can cope, and that's what I usually drink. Just a low sugar. It tends to have more alcohol in it, but I can cope with that much better, and again be sociable. And I sort of stick to 1 or 2 drinks, and that's about it. I don't really overdo it. and
Yeah, I
that's
think
only
it's
on the Fridays usually when I go out with some of the guys at work. You know, it's like a midday thing. We go for a lunch, counter meal, and they buy all these damn stupid palmies that are fried and stuff like that. But I usually buy a steak, just
I'm
sort of
interested
a
in
rare steak.
right. I'm interested in trying to find alcohol that I can enjoy, because I think that there is a line to be drawn before taking things so far that you become vigilant against trying anything new with a restrictive diet like a carnivore diet. So I'm not saying that you should, deliberately start deviating from it all the time, but I'm just saying that there's a certain level of restriction that may not be necessary, that you can sort of start feeling anxious about, I think, if you start really trying to focus on those things.
Yeah, I mean things like pure.
So there's a certain level of like enjoyment that you start restricting yourself away from too, without ever allowing myself to have a drink. For example, in my case, I haven't had a drink since like New Year's, just because it doesn't agree with me. But that being said, I am interested in trying to challenge myself to find something that I can enjoy on on an irregular basis, but I just haven't found it.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's looking for specific ciders and all that, or some sort of drink combining vodka with sort of lemon juice or stuff like that. You know, and putting a bit of like a bit of salt in it and mixing it and giving it a very different sort of profile. At the end of the day, you've got to try different things and see what works for you. It's because there's a subjective sort of palate type, taste factor there that there's going to be different between yourself, myself, and others. But I don't mind that I don't miss the alcohol, and even though it was limited to 1 day or 2 days a week, depending on the week. So I don't mind sort of not doing that as much. I used to be a heavy drinker in the past, and so it's probably a good thing. And I'm glad that I gave up smoking a long time ago as well. So it's it's a waste of a lot of good money that I prefer putting aside and using it for holidays. Okay, so Harry Puffer from fish are not as harmful as vegetable seed oils. Is that mainly due to the oxidated later is in the comparison of the former, or more related to their difference in length? Well, actually, the level of bonds, the double and triple bonds, there are more oxidative points on omega-3s than on omega-6s. So omega-6s are actually more stable than omega-3s. But there's a difference between something that comes out of an oil refinery and is highly, they've used hexane to pull it out of the seeds, and they've basically used all this high levels of heat and damage those lipids to a massive degree. That sort of omega-6 PUFA coming from that production process is going to be very highly oxidized, very highly rancid, very highly damaged, and extremely dangerous for the body. Can't focus at the moment.
People are asking me to share the cat. Sorry. This is Butter.
We know Butter. Hello, Butter.
She's just purring away.
You're luckily I'm not. Hey,
you're lucky. This.
You are lucky I'm not into carbs anymore, because you do well on a sandwich.
Eye on the prize, Butter.
I can see she's got the focus on the meat.
Yeah.
I want the meat. Anyway, back to this question. So, fish, you've got you've basically got astaxanthin, which is an important antioxidant and also refresher of the fatty acid. So what it does is not only does it provide electrons to basically reduce the oxidation of the PUFA from the fish, but also it has the ability to restore the actual fatty acid from that fish to its stable form, you know. So that's the advantage of astaxanthin. Obviously, if you put fish out, not and it'll become rancid because it'll degrade because of the oxygen. But in the actual, when the fish is alive and moving around, that little strip of astaxanthin, which is at that middle part around the body, it actually uses that to stabilize its own PUFA within its own flesh. And so when we eat the fish with the skin, we take that astaxanthin and we have a very, harmless source of PUFA in our diet, in omega DHA and EPA. Not an issue. That's why I don't recommend skinless, fish. Have it with the skin. You need the astaxanthin. That's one thing. And the processing is the other side. That the processing of you can get omega-6s from nuts, omega-6s from seeds that are not going to cause massive inflammation, oxidation, or whatever, or rancidity in your, or you can get PUFA omega-6s from seed oils, which are highly processed. And that's where the problem lies. I don't recommend high levels of omega-6s from plants. I recommend them, if you're going to get them from animal sources, because from animal sources they will get stored or used in an appropriate way. The body knows how to manage them far better. Where the conversion of the plant types is more problematic depending on your genetics and a whole lot of other factors. And also because of the food the way it is, can have issues associated with it. The other element, that something that comes from a food will also be stabilized with a certain amount of vitamin E. Something that comes from a bottle that's gone through a refinery is going to have bugger all. And it doesn't matter whether the bottle says on it that they've added back vitamin E. It's not incorporated in the natural way to stabilize that. Just putting vitamin E in there isn't going to really do anything. I mean, vitamin E in your body can biochemically do a number of things because your body can utilize it to do those processes. But vitamin E in the actual bottle itself isn't going to do anything. And over time, it'll just degrade in there anyway. So the vitamin E will degrade in that rancid oil. So where's the benefit? It's just another marketing ploy. So be very careful of those things. It's best to avoid these things and tell people to avoid them completely.
I admit I've had some skinless cod fillets today because I couldn't find any with skin. So, RIP me.
Yes, bad boy. You've been a bad grandpa.
Well, it's got selenium in it.
That's my excuse. I've got my antioxidant. I've got selenium. That's true. That does help. Selenium does help. I mean, selenium's really, really, really important. If you take a look at not only the people that are getting like really cytokine storms and really bad effects with this virus, are also people that are not only deficient in vitamin D, but also deficient in selenium. So keep the selenium up, and you guys know which sources to get it because I've done plenty of stuff on that.
Oh, I just inhaled some milk. For all the milk I drink, I can't inhale it yet.
You mean you're not snorting it?
Not yet. Make my own dehydrated milk powder.
So Kitty's abusing melatonin and coffee on this fast. Uh, you mean you're taking melatonin? I hope not.
What does coffee abuse look like? Do you punch it before you brew it?
Probably. I assault my coffee before I have it. Here they go. You know, the excuses. I'm not having poop, so I can have beer. The list becomes smoking. You know, you turn up at their place and they're going, you know, they've got smoke here, they're having a beer here, a whiskey there. They're going, I'm not on pooper. Excuses. Harry said it's fine for me to smoke and drink and...
Butter.
Yeah, that's better stuff.
She's still lying just in front of my computer, pawing at my steak. I'm saving a little bit of it for my other cat, who's not up here.
Yes, Butter is greedy. Oops, I just lost my spot.
You do hear a cat purring, Psycho Cat. I just had her on my shoulder 5 minutes ago. She's lying right behind my microphone. My microphone's right here.
Good to hear, Shell. Yes, it's always a good idea to sort of cut down a lot of the abuses. Our body can only take so much.
People too.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen mercury cider. I get this other Tasmanian one, which tastes a hell of a lot better. It's done in the traditional way with the. So it's just hard to find the one that I actually get on the occasion. That's the only problem. That was Butter, the Navy's Butter.
That's right.
I suspect that's the cat name being asked.
Yeah, she has a.
And Luke is asking, thinking of buying magnesium chloride for supplementation. I'm anxious and frequently, which it helps with. You're still eating carbs, aren't you, Luke? Yes.
Yeah.
So
I would take the carbs down first.
I would say the
easy way to test without changing your diet is fast and see if that helps. And if it helps, then it's probably the carbs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I would say it's the carbs before. I said it was a lack of magnesium. So, because usually even people on if they're eating tubers and stuff like that, and potatoes and whatever, they're getting some magnesium in that diet. They're getting a number of minerals in that diet, and because their insulin is going to be slightly elevated, they're not losing a lot of minerals like you lose on a low carb type setting, where you have to deliberately up your salt, your sodium intake to prevent that loss from happening. And so, at most, you may, to rectify things, you may want to put supplemental magnesium and potassium back to rectify things, but you should be getting it from the diet.
Yeah. And the risk with supplementing magnesium is you may very easily just throw other electrolytes out of balance.
That's usually what happens when people start putting a lot of these sort of different supplements in. They just create a havoc in terms of electrolyte balances in the body.
Do you know if the imbalance thing is less of an issue if you take it transdermally, like if you have a magnesium salt bath or something, an Epsom salt bath?
Less of a problem. Yeah, the body the body absorbs and also deposits that much better. The biggest problem is anything coming through the gut, hits the gut lining, or coming through the mouth, hits the gut lining, and just gets, and if it's highly bioavailable, which is usually what supplements are, just gets in the bloodstream too fast. It's not in a controlled way. or at least when you're getting it from an Epsom salt bath, the body will absorb and take up, and a lot of it gets stored in bone and soft tissue. So you don't get this massive amount going into your bloodstream.
Right.
Which
and
is
your
a
body
bit
wants to pull potassium to compensate.
Precisely. It starts, there's because you've got these key electrolytes, you've got calcium, sodium, you've got potassium and all that. And if you look at what is our body made up, it's salt water. What's high in ocean water? Calcium and sodium. Potassium and magnesium aren't that high. They only become an issue because they are needed for a whole lot of biological processes, especially magnesium with ATP. It's Mg, ATP. It's required for all. But in terms of as an electrolyte in your blood, you don't need a lot of magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
You really need the potassium and the magnesium in the cell, and especially the magnesium in the cell working for oxidative phosphorylation, basically producing ATP. That's where your blood should be like ocean water. That's what it should be. That's what you do when you go to a hospital. They stick you on an IV, on a salt-based IV, and then when you go to your GP, they tell you shouldn't actually consume a lot of salt. It's crazy. But I can understand, because if you look from a standard diet, that probably makes sense. From the perspective of a standard diet, you would say, yep, lower sodium is probably a good idea, because you've got a lot of water retention and a lot of sodium retention naturally from high insulin. I mean, even Walter, which is the chat that I've done with Pim, only used to supplement none of the electrolytes, used to keep sodium and all the other electrolytes low, and only used to supplement on a high sugar diet, low fat, extremely low protein and extremely low fat diet. You would only supplement iron. So, even he understood that you really can cause havoc if you're on a very high carbohydrate diet. This is and this is also pre-Randall, but he still understood a lot of this sort of stuff. But if you're doing a low carb diet, which is what you should be doing, and you're not doing a standard diet, then you need more sodium to keep these minerals in and stuff like that. And you only need a certain amount of these minerals coming in from your diet from regular food. Your body will get as much as it needs and all that sort of stuff. So please don't go overboard with these sort of supplements. They create more problems than they're worth. So I would rather recommend people do an Epsom salt bath, or go to those hot springs where they've got a lot of minerals in the water, and literally just soak your body in those, and you'll get a lot of trace minerals, of all sorts of trace minerals. Is a much better way of doing it than sort of popping pills that really can cause, unless you've got a lot of, you've already created a lot of these problems of low potassium, low magnesium for whatever reason, because of keto flu or something like that. You've actually got a reason for it, yes, but I wouldn't. You can create more issues. So be very careful, Luke. Alcohol with heavy cream and cinnamon. Some of the ideas that some of this, they always try to get the angle. How do I get the alcohol in?
Okay,
I'll add cream.
I admit,
cream.
One of the reasons that I had wanted to try to find an alcohol that agreed with me is because my best friend and I wanted to watch The Big Lebowski and drink like a carnivore or low carb equivalent white Russian that we would just make, something along the lines of cream and vodka. And I haven't been able to do it yet. I want to.
That's an appropriate place to puke in, the hospital.
Yeah, I understand.
Crazy is that?
I understand hand sanitizers are a pretty bad source of xenoestrogens.
That's true. So you've got
So
xenoestrogens, and also you've got the potential of causing, getting rid of the less harmful bacteria and causing all sorts of
right.
bacteria. So it's best to use a 70% alcohol base with something like a friend of mine. What he does, he combines 70% alcohol. I'll just use 70% pure alcohol. I don't bother, but he puts aloe vera in it and mixes it with aloe vera.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how he does it. Fair enough. I know his mum uses pure 70% alcohol, and she puts, from memory, I think it's a sort of a citric type, lemony type flavor, and that's what she puts in her hand sanitizer, and that's a much safer hand sanitizer to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be overusing. That should be used for purposes like I'm walking in the door and I've just walked and I just sanitize my hands immediately so I can, because I've been outside or whatever. That's one thing. But you don't want to be doing that on a constant basis. What you want to be using is soap, and soap is the best thing to wash your hands. And if you wash them, for a couple of seconds, you will break down because remember, the same thing with, remember I said last time about the vitamin D, and if you soap your hands, if you wash yourself too much, you'll lose a lot of the vitamin D. Well, it's the same sort of issue with the viruses and all these sort of bacteria, viruses, and whatever else. Their outer surface has got this sort of lipid type membrane. These and even the sort of stuff that comes into these exosomes that come out, they've got this sort of lipid structure. So if you use soap, you will break it down, and so make it ineffective. So soap's actually your best option. I wouldn't over abuse sanitizers, and I wouldn't over abuse even alcohol ones.
Yeah, because you're still stripping away the oils on your hands, so you're still increasing your susceptibility to topical absorption of environmental contaminants too.
Precisely. Yep. And you sort of don't want to do that. Clear tequila is apparently socially acceptable.
Nice tequila was always one of my favorite drinks, actually, just sipping tequila. A lot of people are puzzled over that because they think of tequila as like the one that you bring out at the end of the party, but it's a nice drink if you start with it too.
Richard, that's grandpa to you. Not dude. Not dude. What sort of respect is that for the elderly? And what does Butter do? She walks across and turns his connection off. Perfect timing.
Good timing. Butter hit backspace on my keyboard, so she navigated away from the. Sorry.
I said it was perfect timing.
I mean, no, I was so offended. I can't. I have to leave. Everybody calling me grandpa. It's hurting my feelings.
Precisely. But it still can become rancid if you leave fish out for too long. The fatty acids can become rancid. You'll know from the smell.
Yeah, smell and taste test is
yes,
pretty reliable as long as your food's not contaminated.
I think these people just turn up for butter.
I mean, I do too. Honestly, it's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, me too. We've all got our real motivations.
She's still just right here. I need to get an external webcam so I can just leave it set up when I take my computer away, and then I'd be able to turn it and show you. But As it is, I have to
Well,
move my whole computer.
You could on your channel have a live stream of the cats wandering or Butter wandering
Butter.
around doing her own thing. That's right.
Yeah, I should mount a GoPro on her.
Exactly.
She busies herself.
Yes. So, Harry, please lecture on caffeine and coffee. So many studies means you can always find one suits your thoughts and all that. Look, we don't call it oxalate juice for no reason. So you will get oxalates. In terms of what I can only see, the antioxidant thing, that argument doesn't really sit with me. If you get a coffee that's over, like really heated high, it more or less loses all its antioxidants, so it's useless. If you make instant coffee, which is freeze-dried, you will get some antioxidants, but it's nothing to write home to mum about. It's going to be very little. So it's over, all these sort of, and at the end of the day, what actually does it induce? A hormetic effect. So really, you're getting glutathione from it. Couldn't you just exercise to get glutathione? Or fast? You get more glutathione that way, even more.
Or take a hot bath with Epsom salt.
Precisely. All that sort of stuff. So is coffee really necessary? No. Does caffeine have certain downsides? It does for some people in that regard. Yep. Is it, I drink coffee, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is it required? Black coffee will not kick you out of a fast. That's true. And it may even enhance the actual process of autophagy. So there could be an argument that, it sort of one outweighs the other a bit on that front. How much is unclear because nobody's really studied it. A lot of people have talked about these pathways, but nobody's proven definitively in any study mechanistically that this is actually happening. So that's still speculation about that side of things, that people are promoting coffee with fasting. That's all it is.
I drink coffee because I like it.
Precisely, me too. Because it raises also cortisol as well. So is it a good thing? Probably not for that. For another reason. Well, you can add salt to coffee, but that would taste like shit to basically lower cortisol. But, we drink it because we like it. Me too. So the only thing that I can actually think, the only single benefit in coffee is that, pound for pound or gram for gram or whatever, it's got far more niacin than many other foods. So
yeah.
So B3.
I'm interested that you touched on that because I have heard, and I don't know the veracity of this at all, which is why I want to ask. I have heard that coffee can interfere with B vitamin absorption, that it can contribute to B vitamin malabsorption issues.
I've heard of it, but there's no. Let's put it this way: there's no real good science. I suspect that look, some of the components of coffee have been shown independently to cause this effect, but coffee itself, because coffee, remember, like any food, it's a total food. It's got a lot of elements to it.
Whole foods versus isolates are always a completely different story.
Exactly. So I'm reluctant to say, I can't put my hand on my heart and say, yep, definitively, no. But there may be some low grade level potentially, yes. Yeah, but do I have really good proof for that? No. So I can't argue that. So I can argue all the other stuff, and the only benefit that I can actually see is niacin. And niacin is good for the redox potential, So you basically get NADH, NAD plus. You see all those little things in the citric cycle. You see all those little things, those NADH, NAD plus type things, that the NAD, as we call it. Now that's where niacin helps. So that's the only benefit. But there are plenty of other foods like, pork has heaps of niacin as a meat. So do you really need coffee? No. But that's the only benefit that I can really think of, and that it tastes nice.
Yeah, pork isn't nearly as good in a mug with cream.
Exactly. I agree. Just doesn't go down well. It could get stuck in the throat, with all those fluids. Yes. He's been larded.
But yeah, even the oxalate argument with coffee is sort of it's very low. It's like technically it has some oxalate if you're concerned about absolutely eliminating every source of oxalate in your diet, I suppose. But even Sally K. Norton has said that coffee is pretty low on the list in terms of oxalate-rich foods.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's so low that it's not even worth even discussing. So.
And the infusion method matters too.
Actually, just let me.
And before anyone goes accusing me of being a coffee addict and just defending the things that playing devil's advocate here, I have removed coffee for extended periods, and I always end up reintroducing it because I don't notice any particular benefit without it, and I like it.
Yeah, look, that's. Oops. So let me just. Oops, it's popping out again. Damn. Let me just share the screen. So if you're looking, at foods, that's what you want to basically avoid.
And rhubarb is way up there.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's rhubarb season right now, so that's relevant to me.
Yes, exactly. So the highest is basically, not even raw spinach, cooked spinach. And I used to have, in my paleo, keto days and all that, I used to have bacon and eggs with spinach in the morning, every morning nearly.
So that would just be because the oxalate survives cooking, and as you remove the water content of the spinach by weight, it has more oxalate, I guess, once it's cooked.
Yeah, it actually ends up having more when it's cooked. So it's actually even worse, for you. Now, obviously, when you're doing paleo, or you tend to basically be doing low carb to try and lose weight as well and stuff like that, you tend to take more dairy out of the diet. So you've got less calcium to bind that. So you're actually exacerbating the problem. This is why over those 5 years, I had kidney stones 3 times. So not advisable to consume, but these are the foods. So you're looking at rhubarb, obviously, but also you're looking at rice bran. Now you understand why the Asians don't have their rice white. They get rid of, they don't have brown rice, very rarely. So it's not a popular thing. Again, because they just want the energy. Because they're physically active, they're only having a small amount. Well, they used to. Now they've changed their diet, but they used to have only small amounts, and so it was less of an issue. Almonds, the favorite, keto, paleo type, for flour and whatever else.
Yep.
Even miso soup.
So I've been dealing with oxalate dumping intermittently every 3 weeks or so for like 6 months.
Yep.
And or a little 8 months, and I'm positive that the oxalate exposure that I was taking in was almond butter.
I went, because of almonds and because of all these sort of things, I went through an absolute year of actually now I haven't had an episode now since January.
It's good to hear.
So I think I'm over it. I'm over that, but for prior to January, fuck me, I used to have quite a lot of dumps every month nearly. I'd have and I could see it, my urine would foam up and all that. I'd be on the citric acid immediately and on the sulfur. And that's the reason why I consumed a lot of MSM sulfur as well, for that purpose, because it just strips away sulfur, oxalate. So it's nasty stuff. And it's bad enough our soils are sulfur poor. On top of that, stripping it away isn't really a good thing for our health. because it's so important in so many biochemical processes, sulfur, let alone maintaining that negative charge throughout the whole body. You need sulfonation of all tissue. So, yeah, anybody telling you that spinach is a good health food, tell them the lunatics. And this is sort of the sort of levels. These are in the lower levels compared to, those are the high ones. So obviously spinach is right up there with rhubarb and all that. But when we're looking at some of the other stuff like, wheat berries, corn, these sort of baked potatoes with skin, the skin is where most of it is, not the actual, the flesh inside, but the actual skin is the worst part in terms of oxalates. Soy flour, way up there as well. Not as high as spinach, but still these are all high. Navy beans, beets, cocoa powder.
So many of the keto-friendly treats,
yep, exactly,
are on there. All the nuts and cocoa powder.
Precisely. When you look at that, raspberries, cashews, okra, all these sort of things that a lot of people on keto diets would basically go to are very high.
And that's what I was doing before I went carnivore without knowing it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that really sort of people are completely unaware of. Oops. Yeah, completely unaware of these sort of levels that do exist within these foods. And so I'll just leave it up there for a while so people can take a snapshot of that. That's from the Chicago University. So that's where I got it from. And, so these are well-known figures in these foods. So you really need to be very careful, guys, in that regard. So go back to normal screen.
But the point being, even at the very bottom of that chart, coffee is below that. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Coffee does not have as much compared to all these other things. So really important that, because I hear a lot of nonsense out there about coffee and oxalates. And I'm going, nah, it's not an issue.
Yeah, the other thing too is that if you're experiencing oxalate dumping, one of the paradoxical ways to stop it is to consume oxalate again, right? And it'll alleviate the symptoms. And so if coffee had sufficient oxalate to be an issue to store oxalate that way, you'd think that it would stop the dumping.
Exactly.
So,
and it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because when I was dumping, I was still having coffee, even up to 4 coffees a day, and it was doing nothing to stop my dumping.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very low. But it's, again, a lot of people, how can I put it? They like to jump and amplify things and make them as worse or whatever, just for the clickbait, which is what's happening out there. So, yeah. So it doesn't really have much benefits. It just tastes nice, and it's got a bit more, and it's got, compared to a lot of other type of things that probably you shouldn't have in your diet, it just basically provides that additional benefit of niacin. So, consider that important. Now, how are you? What are your thoughts on very high protein carnivore diets? So that you're not ketogenic and not producing ketones above 0.3 millimoles, and ketogenic when doing a carnivore diet. What is meant? Okay. I usually recommend a 1-to-1, and a 1-to-1 for men, that is 1.2 for women so women's sort of carnivore approach is more ketogenic as a consequence, because it's 20 to 25% protein. On the other one, the male one, it's 30 to 35%. Now, some of these other higher protein, so if you're doing 30%, which is what I usually just do around about 30 or sometimes sub that, that will basically, you'll remain in a low grade ketosis, and then you'll slip back into ketosis once your you're fasting or time restricted feeding or whatever. So that's fine. That's good. That's what you want. You want this sort of to change and not be continuously in a catabolic state. But unless you're trying to lose weight, that's a different issue altogether. But it's usually the percentages we're talking about that some of these people who are doing bodybuilding and other stuff like that and need to build more muscle, more tissue in general, that's when they're doing something like 40% protein, sometimes even higher than that. So if you're trying to do that, if you're trying to basically remain have higher levels of ketones, you want to be no more than 30%. If you really want to have good ketone levels as a male, you probably want to be at 25% of protein and 75% of and zero carbs, because they're not necessary. That's in a carnivore ketogenic type.
Yeah, Pilodema, I just linked to a video with Bart K talking with Keto Troy about gluconeogenesis, and they touch on explaining why ketosis is not the goal of a carnivore diet. It just happens. So you shouldn't be shooting to always remain in perpetual ketosis unless there's some very specific therapeutic goal that you're seeking with it. And that's
Precisely.
very rare, like epilepsy and severe conditions, maybe.
And it should only be for those sort of purpose. And then it's usually 90% and 10% protein.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it usually is, the therapeutic form. And I know the paleomedicina, they usually have something like, there are different types where they have anywhere between 15 to 25%, depending on what they're trying to achieve with the client. And so they have those sort of, and a lot of other keto sort of professionals have things like that as well. So I would say, your aim shouldn't be ketosis, basically. To be in a continuously catabolic state. As I said, unless you're trying to lose weight. If you're not trying to lose weight, then you shouldn't be in that sort of state.
And even if weight loss is the goal, then being momentarily brought out of ketosis after a high protein meal shouldn't necessarily be avoided all the time.
No, it's not a bad thing to do, because remember, your insulin levels are going to be, your insulin to glucagon ratio is going to be very low, like 1.3. So it's going to be very, very low. So your insulin levels are going to be very low to glucagon. So it's not an issue. I mean, even pure sugar is about 4. And on pure sugar, just having pure sugar like the potato diet, having a glucagon to insulin to glucagon ratio of 4, you will lose weight. You'll be very catabolic. So having a steak with meat is 1.3. So it's very low. So it's a non-issue, and it's actually a good thing to have that sort of pulsatile, that in and out type effect. What you don't want to be doing is spiking your insulin at the wrong times, like early in the morning when your cortisol is very high. And if you have to eat very early in the morning, then make sure that it's that you're consuming fat and protein in the morning, because that's what you want to do.
With salt.
Yep. And if you're eating, like studies have shown that if you're eating, let's say, time restricted, like 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock or stuff like that later on in the day, what the body does is it will actually push forward that time where you're not storing fat when you're consuming fat. You're just burning it. So it'll actually push that forward. And where I usually, as night comes in, I usually sort of switch. I'll have like milk, which doesn't have as much fat, has a bit more sugar in it in the evenings. So in the evenings, I usually have things like, milk and probably leaner type, if I'm trying to lose weight, that is, leaner types of meats and stuff like that. And it all has to do with all these enzymatic processes, the way they work. They kick in at certain times and all that. If you're on a standard diet, butter again. If you're on a standard diet, then it can, you want to roll back. It will happen. After about 2 or 3 o'clock, you don't want to be basically consuming shitloads of fat when you've already consumed quite a bit early in the day at lunchtime. Your body still needs quite a few hours to digest that. And by the time your body gets around to digesting it all, you're already hitting evening. And in that evening part, your melatonin is starting to rise. Oops, there it is. Your melatonin is starting to rise, and your body's ability, all the mechanisms are starting to shut down. So your gut, all that sort of the absorption and the utilization and the transcription factors and all that are starting to down-regulate because you're going into night. So what the body does is it goes, I've got all this bloody energy coming in at night. What am I going to do with it? It stores it. Because it's trying to get you ready for sleep, and you're just packing in the calories at the wrong time. So the only difference is if you do it in the morning, then you'll utilize that energy. And obviously, if it's low, if it's like fats and proteins, you won't, and even fructose won't spike in the mornings, won't spike in because it doesn't spike insulin, so it doesn't have a negative effect with, I'm not promoting fructose. I'm just saying that if you're a vegan and you're consuming a lot of fruit through the morning to the midday or whatever, it's not going to have as deleterious effect as somebody on a standard diet. So because fructose through that period of time will be utilized as energy, won't be stored as effect, so the same thing with fat and all that, because your body's geared up, for the day and going, we need energy. So you can basically time restrict yourself to 11 o'clock, like primitive humans would have to go out for the hunt, midday persistent hunters. And so they would just utilize their own body fat, or you can eat fructose as a vegan, or you can eat, fat, bacon and eggs and stuff like that as a, as a carnivore or an omnivore or whatever, you classify yourself as whether you're a carnivore helicopter or whatever else, you can basically just sit around and munch on that earlier. So when you break your fast is the time when your body will gear up to using fat, fructose fat, and far better, far efficiently in that earlier part. Later on in the day, carbohydrates, you tend to not absorb carbohydrates. So what happens is it'll either spill out and you'll get rid of it, part of it, like glucose we're talking about, or you'll get it placed in glycogen because you've already depleted some of your glycogen. And so it's less likely to turn into fat. Because if you're basically putting in the morning, you're having milk and you're putting in a whole lot of other, like creams and fattier stuff and all that, what you're actually is you're putting a lot of nutrients there. You probably are at a low grade still end up engaging the Randall cycle within that meal to some extent. So it's when you hit that threshold, it's an on-off, and then after that, it's a gradient depending on how much, what the amount of nutrients in the system are. So, yeah, it's really important to gauge that. But based on your question, the aim is not to race after ketones and ketosis. And usually if you've been in a fat-adapted ketogenic state for very long, you usually will gravitate to very low levels. When I was in deep ketosis, my levels were up to 3-4 millimoles every single day. And then eventually, as I got past the 4th month, they started coming down because I became so fat-adapted, the resident time in my bloodstream lowered considerably. And so I couldn't get above, 1.5 or whatever, even when I was really trying. I was in that much lower level. Occasionally, if I use some medium like coconut milk, coconut oil and stuff like that, I could push them above 2, but that was artificially by pushing a whole lot of MCT, medium chain triglycerides, through the portal vein directly into the liver, and then the liver just kicked it all out as ketones. So, that's a bit of a cheat. But I'm not really, it's not the normal physiology saying, and what happens is those excess, you're not going to actually use them if you're efficiently using a lot of the others from free fatty acids. So eventually you'll urinate more of that. So what have you achieved?
Yes, having energy sitting around in your blood is not something your body wants. Whether it's ketones or otherwise.
It gets fat adapted, and then it basically will utilize that rapidly, a lot of that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with these vegans and as well, when they do these high sugar diets and very low fat and whatever, the body gets used to, builds an arsenal of proteins, and it usually catabolizes, because they're not getting enough protein, catabolize a lot of their own tissue. That's why they waste away the way they waste, in order to create a lot of this sort of stuff to deal with this energy. But, that's a sort of, we've probably gone a bit too far, but anyway, you know me.
On that note, I think I need to get going.
Okay. We had fun. Thanks for being around,
Thanks, I'm glad to make it for the earlier part of the stream, because I'm more alert and able to form coherent thoughts a little bit better before it's so late in the day.
Okay. So we know where this is going. It's basically, grandpa is more capable earlier, and once it gets a bit too late for him, and then he's trained Butter to sort of turn it off, and Butter, accommodates, because it's the meat. What he does is he's got close to the keyboard there, he's got the meat, and Butter goes, I want the meat. I need to go to bed,
That's it. That's precisely it. Do you have a camera in here watching me? How do you know this?
I think Luke's organising an installation, but it's taking some time to get out of Brazil.
All right.
It's on the way.
Well, thanks for letting me know, at least, that I'm being surveilled.
That's it. I mean, what are friends for?
For surveilling each other, clearly.
Hey, they use social media, Facebook and everything else to troll their relatives.
That's right. At least if there's a camera on me, I can see it and understand exactly what's going on.
Exactly. Do it properly. It's a half-pissed sort of approach to using social media to troll your family. You're gonna go all the way. Really go all the way. Become a little brother.
All right. Well, have a good night, Harry, and everyone else watching.
Mate.
And I'll catch you next week.
Yeah, definitely. See you, mate. Well, back to me. Now let's get back. Yes, wild cod is high in selenium. It definitely is very good. I'll be damned. I had pinto beans. You don't eat pinto beans, do you? God almighty. I used to as well. Look, remember, if you're on a high carbohydrate diet, you do need more magnesium. Carbohydrate metabolism uses a lot of magnesium, and that's where the problem lies. So is excessive blood fibrin, sticky blood. an electron issue. Not exactly. So it depends on, so you can have an inflammatory diet, which can actually induce fibrinogen to deal with all that. When you don't move a lot, you can get platelet aggregation and get an effect. It's usually more to the diet in that regard. I mean, that's the oxidation which we're talking about when we're talking about, knocking out an electron, or having something like a free radical that comes along and just strips an electron off and unstabilizes that fat, that piece of tissue. And that's what really is when we talk about oxidative stress, we're talking about these things literally ripping things off, and then the antioxidants go back and actually electron donors and actually stabilize that tissue. But in terms of fibrinogen and all that, it's usually if you're eating an inappropriate diet and you can build up clotting factors. I mean, there are when it comes to clotting factors, there are a lot of ways of actually doing that. Different things will drive clotting factors. Certain foods will drive clotting factors. That is an extensive conversation. It's a video that I will be doing something on. I mean, fibrinogen, retinol actually breaks down fibrinogen. You don't need aspirin. So that's a tip. When you're on a carnivore diet, you usually have those foods that actually will reduce that about. Things like L-citrulline, which actually gives you a bigger nitric oxide boost, will also break down fibrinogen. Obviously, aspirin will also, but aspirin has some other deleterious effects on your lungs, on the sort of the villi in there, which isn't a good thing. So yeah, so basically, stickiness of the blood is also related to that negative charge. If you don't have enough sulfur, you don't have enough of that negative charge being created in your endothelial cells, well, then you're going to have more stickiness, and you can create, because of that stickiness, the body can respond to create clotting factors to try and deal with that sort of stuff. So inflammation and damage, like oxidation, so that can drive. So it's not. So it is it is through oxidation you will get, but it's not an electron issue the way you're thinking of it. If I'm getting it right, so oxidation is one process, and that can have deleterious effects, and the body can respond by creating fibrotic and tissue to basically cover that, to protect that area and stuff like that, to Band-Aid solution. That, if that's the way you want me to answer that question, sometimes it's a bit hard to understand the way you're actually with what you're actually asking specifically. But yes, they are related in a sense, but in the way I sort of explained it. I hope that it sort of made sense. Past the water. Yes, they're fantastic. They are really good. Yeah, look, it's. I always say, just lying in or swimming or just lying in oceanic water, it's so healthy. Or the hot springs, which have got a lot of minerals in them, they are perfect. Yes, I suspect they would stop you for that sort of reason. Yeah, that's the sort of thing. Precisely. Yep, they can create superbugs. Not a very good thing. It's the same thing in hospitals. These hospital sort of things. In the past, we used to use chlorine. So we would use chlorine-based type products and stuff like that, and literally go in and clean up. But because doctors and nurses don't like the smell, we got rid of it. And now we've got endemic issues in hospitals because of it. Go figure. And so what they've got is they've got all these sanitizers in hospital, rather than basically cleaning all the walls and all the floors with chlorine and really killing off everything. And you can actually get safer solutions. There are other alcohol-based solutions you could use as well, other than chlorine, that does the same thing. But we don't use that. We use all these freaking sanitizers, and create all sorts of superbugs. Hospitals are endemic with superbugs. I mean, if I ever go to a hospital, either to visit somebody or because I have to go, like last time when I injured my shoulder, I came back and had a shower, washed myself thoroughly, threw all the clothes into the actual washer, because it's a breeding ground. Tons of activity, bodyboarding, on the ground minerals. Best sleep ever during coastal vacation. Oh, look, I used to, as a youngster, get on my bicycle from Agreement on the west coast of Greece and literally cycle all over the place. And to the north, 40 kilometers to the north, there was a beach, and 45 kilometers to the south, there was a beach, and about 25 kilometers to the west, there was the Ionian Sea. So beautiful places. I used to go to the south quite a bit because with my mates, and we used to go. That's an area where they've got these salt beds and all that. Plus, there's beautiful bream. So we used to catch these bream that were very much saltier type bream and cook them. So those were the days. Yeah, he's tough. He's tough. Don't worry yourself. Okay, Harry, is rancid butter okay to eat? We eat yolk. Very hard to get butter to go rancid. Not that it can't. It does have a small amount of PUFA in it. It's a very small amount, which is what you should. And it does have also some MUFA as well, and that also can go slightly off because saturated fat tends to be very stable. And the thing is with dairy in particular, it's very high in saturated fats. So butter's less of an issue. Things like tallow that have got more MUFA and PUFA, and especially lard, you probably have more issues with. But butter, it's far less of an issue. Really hard to get butter to go rancid. That's one thing that I've actually found. And even the Pure study actually showed that people consuming high levels of dairy, like full cream dairy, and literally had better health outcomes compared to those having low-fat dairy. It's an observational study of people on a standard diet, but it shows quite clearly that even though dairy is much higher in saturated fats than tallow or lard, it's still, because when you're looking at things like dairy, you're looking at anywhere between 60+% in terms of saturated fat. So it's very saturated in that regard. Where if you're looking at tallow, it's only around the 50%, and lard is about, I think 42. I think it's around 42 anyway. So much lower. So which is the best? Butter that's got far more saturated fat, and it's, and even that smell, it's not due, the smell that's coming from there, it's not actually due to the fats, it's due to the proteins breaking down, and the small amount of galactose sugar that's in there that's breaking down. That's really where that's rancidity or smells coming from. Because if you produce a clarified butter, or like as a standard clarified butter, or a more refined, which is ghee, not an issue. You'll never get that smell. Because ghee, for instance, can be kept outdoors, like in the subcontinent where they've got ghee, and it's just kept outdoors. You don't even have to refrigerate it. So it doesn't become rancid at all, because you've removed, with ghee, you remove more or less 100% proteins and sugars completely. So it's really only that. There's just, there's not enough in butter to cause rancidity. So it's usually just the proteins and that it's breaking down. So I usually keep butter at a much lower temperature, because I want to avoid the proteins and the sugars breaking down that are in there. But when it comes to ghee, I just keep it outdoors. I just keep it in the cupboard. I don't bother. It's not even in the fridge, because I need the space for the meat and other things. So it's far less of an issue. Yeah, so it's only that sort of stuff. So it depends how long you've had it as well. Yogurt's a different thing altogether. It's a fermented food. It's a completely different thing in that regard. So, but I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't worry at all. So, yep. It's probably not good to consume rancid, or not rancid, but proteins and sugar that's broken down. It's probably, but the tiny amount that you're having is a blip. Your antioxidant system, glutathione, and all these other things, if you're low carbing and all that, will just deal with it just like that. So I don't see it as an issue. It's more of a taste issue. That's what I should have said from the beginning. It's more of a taste issue. I wouldn't say so. Depends. Look, small amounts of caffeine seem to have an association, no causation, no causal. There's no studies. There's not one. If you find a study that actually shows a causal relationship with positive outcomes for mental with caffeine, please let me know, because I haven't found one. So there's only associations, so we don't really know. And I would say that if you take a look at the body, most people, like myself, I have high detoxification pathways for coffee. I can get it out of my system 4 times faster than anyone else, than most other people that don't have my genes, I should have said. So I don't think caffeine is a good thing, pure caffeine. If you were to say 1 gram of pure caffeine to 1 gram of coffee, I'd take the coffee, not the caffeine. So I don't think it's better. And a lot of that sort of neurological type benefits people talk about, no real supporting evidence. So I'd be really concerned about really doing those sort of biochemical experiments with my brain with high doses of caffeine. So no, Harut, I wouldn't advise it. Don't play doctor with your brain, please. You would, because you're a Brazilian. Good for exports, mate. Is that what you? Yeah. Look, there's probably more nutrition in that powder as well. As also the other one is maca, MACA. That probably has more nutrition than coffee as well. But it's probably more for people that are on high carbohydrate diets. Probably need that sort of stuff than the rest of us. So it's actually got a high caffeine content. Ugh. I don't know much about it, this fruit, but yes, I don't know whether it's really needed. And Kate says, I can only stomach decaf these days. I miss the Cuban Star and Ethiopian Yirgat Chef. I probably killed it in. Sorry about that. I do apologise. But yes. Oh, look, I've got the genetics that it doesn't bother me. I'm just lucky in that regard. Most people in the Middle East, and also in the sort of southern parts of Europe, Southeast Asia, and those parts, you tend to have these genes are more pronounced in the population, is because they've been exposed to coffee for far longer, and also Central America and parts like that. So, yeah. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily optimal. And if decaf works for you, yep, go for it. You're still getting the niacin from the decaf, which is good. So you're still getting some benefit. And Christina, and if I don't have my coffee first thing in the morning, the menopausal dragon comes out of my face. Don't you dare talk to me. Everybody's got their issues. Small, big, large, or whatever. Yes, I usually have my coffee at my first coffee usually starts, and that I break my fast with coffee at about 11, which is the cortisol's at the lowest at that stage, so it doesn't bother me. And then probably about half an hour after that, or an hour after that, I usually have some sort of meal. And then I have another meal after that. And I try to keep it within 6 to 8 hours, depending. So sometimes I'll cut back from eating anything else after 5, or sometimes I may drag it on until, for social reasons, I may end up dragging it on longer. And if I'm going somewhere that I know that I'll be eating up until about 8 o'clock or whatever, then I usually move my first meal to 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock deliberately. So, but that's pretty rare in today's environment. So, can bone broth act as a calcium source in the place of dairy? Not really. Look, it depends on the bones. Some bones seem to have more calcium. And when it comes to minerals, like things like carcasses from bird type creatures, turkeys, chickens. I'm not sure about geese and ducks. Not sure about those two. But anyway, those sort of bird type carcasses, if you do a bone broth of those, you'll actually, because they're much softer, the bones, you'll get, for each hour of brothing, you will get more minerals out of the actual carcass compared to something like from a ruminant, which will take much longer. And if you're buying, for instance, you've got a bone broth from a cow, and a bone broth from chicken, I would always get the chicken one because I know it's going to have the manufacturer that is even if the most ethical, best manufacturers, they would have probably done it for 1 or 2 hours because time is money. And so the amount of leaching will be much lower. It's probably one reason why they used to call chicken broth as penicillin in the past. So especially the Jewish mothers, they used to basically cook up a lot of that, and they were quite smart and wise women, and they had a tradition of that sort of thing. So I would say, yep, that'd be probably the best. But if you're looking at calcium, you'll get some from bones. It's probably you'll get some from the flesh. Because remember, even the body will actually store some calcium in soft tissue and also use calcium to suppress viruses in soft tissue. And we've got billions of viruses like all animals circulating around us. They just don't harm us because we don't have receptors for them to use to exploit, only certain viruses. So I would say, probably not a bad source, but it's not a good source. I think still dairy would trump in that regard. And you can actually see it even amongst most humans. What did they used to do? They used to break down and crush the actual bones and all that. We don't do that. They literally physically used to cook them and break them down, and they would make them into a powder type thing to really extract as many minerals as they could out of them. We just don't do that. We do our bone broths. We don't do that because it's too much processing. They used to use these big rocks and just literally crush these bones and sort of grind them down to a powder. They used to extract quite a bit with boiled water and stuff like that, and water that they would mix, and they would get it that way. So yeah, I don't think on a standard broth you would get as much as you would get from calcium, unless you really went through the crushing process and all this. And and that's how many hours have you got to spend in a day? So yeah. Yeah, it definitely was a good question. I hope I've answered it sufficiently in that regard. But look, bone broths are good. They're very good, especially for trace minerals. They're really good in terms of trace minerals. I mean, you can go for a colloidal mineral, which has got trace minerals in it. That's another option. But bone broths are definitely a cheaper option. Yes, boxes of spinach. That's what I used to consume. Yes. Bad. Caused me a lot of grief for a whole year. So going through from last year when I was when I sort of more or less switched to a carnivore diet from a low carb diet, and I sort of jettisoned pretty much all the plants bar, herbs and spices and stuff like that. Last year was a hellish year, even though I sort of, tried to avoid discussing the issue, because then I didn't even have a channel. The only times that I was actually towards the end of the year where I discussed the oxalate issue is when I got on with Bart and started having chats with him and discussing it on the periphery. But that wasn't my major focus at the time. It was more cardiovascular, more the Mediterranean diet and other things like that. But yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare there for on and off. Yeah, I went through a bit of sulfur and a bit of citric acid to basically deal with this fucking oxalate. So it is real, especially if you've consumed massive amounts like I did. So yes, bad stuff. Yes, it's where a lot of us did. in our low carb keto days, a lot of us did. I had a mysterious eye infection all the time. Oxalate. Well, actually, you will get oxalates in your sort of. Trying to think which parts of the eye. I can't remember, but you will get certain pain and sensation. So also at certain parts of your fingers and stuff like that, you will get some oxalates coming out sometimes. And the way you would know is the way I realized at the time was you'd get this sort of like it's like not really like any, when you touch a leaf and the leaf has got indentations or whatever, very minor indentations, you can just barely feel those really tiny little things on the leaf. That's the same thing how it felt, and that was clearly from that sort of oxalate coming out. And with it also a bit of salt came out. It had a funny sort of mixture, but I can tell you, yeah, I'm glad I'm over that year. Last year was pretty much nasty, on and off. I mean, it wasn't extreme, but nearly every month I'd have a bit of a dump, and it was just, oh God, is this going to ever stop? So yeah, it's not funny at all, and really bad. And I used to get a lot of pain in my kidneys as well. So I used to have to rub my kidneys continuously, and it's just fucking a misery it was for a while there, especially toward the middle of the year. And it was winter on top, so it was cold. You felt cold and in pain, and God almighty. I even went once to the hospital out of so much pain. So I thought, but luckily I didn't have another kidney stone because I was getting enough citric acid into me. Yeah. Bad. Let's get to another question. And Shelley asks, I only have moderate ketone readings when fasting. Longer the fast, the higher the readings. I've lost 45 pounds through, so it's not needed. Exactly. If you're losing weight, you're actually in a state of ketosis. So you're in a state of catabolism and breaking down. So where's the issue? And exactly, that's what I was starting to get, moderate. When I ate, my ketones would go down, and then when I'm not eating, fasting, or intermittent time-restricted feeding, my ketones would be in that moderate level. I could never get them in that very high level unless I spiked, my food with MCTs, with more MCTs primarily from coconut and stuff like that. So yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, good. Yeah, we did for a long time. Look, I did as well. I'm just as guilty of that as well. I sort of obsessed with continuously checking, pricking myself. I mean, how painful and annoying is that? Pricking yourself continuously. That's the sort of crazy things we did, unfortunately. So, yes, definitely not a good thing to do. So Kitty's becoming creative. Luke's dropped the ball, so Kitty's become very creative. Oops. Better turn that off. Carnivore copter. I love it. What are those hands? I'm trying to think about what movie. I can't remember the movie of the hands. It's. Let me know in the comments which movie it was that that sort of hands were in. It's a bit like, was it? No, it's too metallic to be Jurassic Park. Kitty, what are the hands from? Which movie are the hands from? It's some sci-fi, but I can't remember the sci-fi. Crackles. Cackles. Yeah. Yeah, under these circumstances, I would as well, as an attack helicopter. Yes, Terminator. Let me find my spot. Just go to Kate's. Anyone got a recipe for cod liver? Oh, I have 4 bloody tins of them. So if anybody, just put a link for Kate. And is it true that about 40% of the population don't convert plant A to retinol? It varies. It depends on the population that we're talking about, but it can be quite high in some populations, especially populations that have consumed a lot of cod liver oil, like the Irish, some of the Welsh, and especially the Scots, especially in Scotland in the northern part. They have poor beta carotene conversion. And you really know the vegans that come from that have that sort of ancestry, because their skin goes all orangey. You know, it's a giveaway. My beta carotene conversion is 32% reduced, but that's all. I can still convert beta carotene coming from the Mediterranean. But a lot of the tribal societies have very low conversion because they used to get it primarily from animals, not from plants. You know, so yeah. And a lot of populations that the only reason why a lot of populations around the world that especially have had agriculture for a very long period of time, those populations tend to have better conversion rates in terms of beta carotene to retinol. But populations that have had a more animal based, or, you know, so let's say some level of animal based, will have somewhere in between, like the Mediterranean, myself, 32% reduction in capacity. When you're looking at Central Asia, Mongolia, Central Asia, areas like the British Isles, Iceland, the Scandinavian sort of areas, those are the sort of areas where populations didn't have access to a lot of plants, and that's where and they also consumed far more rich animal type foods with that were rich in in retinol. So they tended to down-regulate their ability to convert the carotenoids to retinol. So especially, as I said, the high cod consuming populations, because they were getting so much retinol in, you just need to down-regulate that process, because otherwise you get into potentially, especially in colder climates where you're not getting enough vitamin D to balance the retinol, you could get into issues, and the body so down-regulated carotenoid conversion. And most of these populations did not, you know, I mean, if you think about it, only until refrigeration did we have seasonal either fruit all year round, or things like a lot of these carotenoid-rich foods like carrots and whatever else. They only exist seasonally, not all year round. Especially in winter, you can't find carrots unless you store them in refrigeration, and then the supermarket can provide them in winter. But normally, they would have been out of season, all these things. So you'd never have this build up of beta carotene to turn your body yellow, orangey. And so pretty much these populations consumed certain grains, which they processed, they fermented, they basically would basically soak and do all these things to deactivate a lot of the anti-nutrients and a lot of animal foods. So, yeah, so you definitely don't want all that sort of nasty stuff. Let me see whether I missed any things. Yeah, me too. I love pork. Actually, yesterday at Dad's place, I absolutely pigged out on pork chops and pork sausages. And the funny thing is, the old boy ate no carbs. I mean, I turned up with my mate Sean after we'd gone for a long walk, went to my dad's place, and he had cooked up a big feast. And all I ate was a bit of feta cheese, the meat. And I said, "Oh, you haven't." I said to Dad, "Oh, so you didn't make a salad today?" He said, "No." Yeah, okay. He said, "This is enough." And he only made, he cooked a whole lot of onion rings, and that was primarily for my mate Sean that he knows he likes, and he put that on top of. He created like a bit of a dish with turmeric and stuff like that for the guest. And the old man did not at all. Even though he knows I'm doing carnivore and he's had his own veggie garden and all that. And I was quite shocked. The old man there was just eating meat like me, and I'm going, okay, this is interesting. But he's seen my turnaround in my health and all that. And he's seen as he's put more meat into his diet, he feels better, stronger, more virile, all this sort of stuff. Old people use these sort of remarks, old-fashioned type language. But I think he's starting to creep towards a more carnivorous lifestyle at the age of 85. So very interesting. I was quite taken back. And I looked at his fridge before I left. I couldn't see any plants. There were no plants. He's not buying any plants. So, yeah, seems like he's switching over to the dark side. Yes, interesting. Okay, so I better move right down here. Yep, that's the stuff that I get as well. I've been getting that for some time from Byron Bay as well. Yep, I keep if I've got a lot of, like, when they've got sometimes butter discounted, I usually buy extra amounts and I'll put it in the deep fridge as well. So, and because now I don't use the ice thing because I'm not consuming alcohol in the ice tray and all that, I just put the butter in there. That's where I stack my butter, in the little ice tray thing. I open it up and just I've got a few stacks of butter in there. Anyway, yeah, so very much the same when it's on the cheap, I'll buy extra and I keep some in the fridge as per normal, because I always like putting a bit of butter on my steaks. So Richard thinks ghee smells like old socks. Look, you can actually buy some the Byron Bay ghee really smells nice. There's a couple of ghees around that actually swirl, others that have more of a nuttier taste or whatever. So it depends on, you just have to shop around and try different varieties. You may hit on one that actually has a better, taste to it. Yeah. I think this is a standard theme here, which is good to see. Yeah, I can be a tight ass sometimes. So when I see discounts, I go, now let me throw some additional in my basket, and I'll take that and freeze it. So that's how I sort of approach things. And sometimes I just don't bother going shopping for 1 or 2 weeks because I've got so much shit in my fridge and freezer. The only things that I do go is for my cream. That's it. And that's I just go up the road. I don't even go to a regular. I just go to the IGA store, which is just up the road from where I live. Okay, I better stop sharing that. Still trying to find something. You're welcome. Let me try and find a few questions. There's a lot of banter about, I am under an alias, not under my name, but under a different alias. So yeah, that's the only reason. It's more because that it, if I make comments and stuff like that, it can't get back to work, or somebody won't come across it and say, you said such and such. So it's more related to that. Just in today's environment, it's a bit risque. Let me put it that way. But yes, I keep a low profile, and I stick to my opinions, and even my family doesn't know what my Twitter account is, so I just don't tell anyone. You never know who will be friend or foe in the future. Sometimes, unfortunately, we live in a strange world. Why isn't that popping up? Okay, so that popped up. Let me. I have to share this. This is good. This is a good one. This is a doozy. Hold on. Let me. Can that increase in size? Turn those off. Turn those off. Love it. Love it. The shit that vegans come up with. How do you guys feel about being saturated fat addicts? What absolute fruitcakes they are. Yeah. Go ahead, Dirty Harry style. Go ahead, Vegtard. Make my day. I love it. I love it, mate. You've outdone yourself. That is fun. Give them hell. Give them hell. Yes. You got to have fun with the Vegtards. They just avoid me like the plague, you know. I'll answer their questions. I don't fear them whatsoever because all their questions are just shit, not based on science or anything like that. As I said, veg-tards have a religion, a faith, and it really pisses them off. Even a mate of mine, he basically uses the same approach nowadays when he says to them, look, I'm not arguing you. You like a religion, you've got a faith, you know, that's fine. He just, I follow science, you guys follow a faith, you've got your own ethics and all that. That's fine, you know, and just knocks them off like that. And if they try to argue science, they've got no science anyway. So you can blow them away, but, you know, blow them away. Yes. Luckily, this live stream isn't monetized, so I don't really have to care because it would definitely be demonetized if it was. That is good. That's a good one. I love it. Thanks, mate. What's this? Chris, one bar of dark chocolate a day. Well, that's not going to kill you. It doesn't have a lot of oxalate either. So, you know, if it basically said, you know, it's like the rest of us, none of us do 100%. So not an issue. And carnivore diet is not a religion. It's basically to maximize the nutrient density of our foods, but it's not basically going crazy like the vegans. You can imagine if you put something in the vegan food that was basically, they would literally go strange and weird and start, you know, trying to spit it all out like mad. It'd be funny. Turn up and you say, well, that's fake bacon and I'll have my regular bacon. And you just get a wrapper, which is a fake wrapper, and they think. Then after, you can imagine they're in the toilet, you know, trying to throw up. That would be funny. Let's get beyond this. I'm having too much fun, cracking up like mad. Oops, why is that frozen? Please don't freeze, dude. Yes, we're bloody meat addicts, saturated fat addicts and meat addicts. Cat's a perfume addict. We've all got our little indiscretions, I can see. Bellbird is basically a meat and metal addict. I suspect that's music, metal music. You don't have one of those sort of, I have a fantasy fixation on metal. Hope not. Shell's a ribeye addict. I'm a pork addict, actually. Yeah, I love pork. You mean they harass you even on private messengers? So who is this person? I probably didn't pick up on the conversation earlier. We know. It's so obvious. You know, you just have to look at some of your comments. You know, we know you're a beer addict. You don't need to continually remind us. Hey, have you noticed I've been trolling you a couple of times? Yes, she does. She definitely does. Yes. God, it's, as I said, if the only thing on the earth was left and they told me you can only have one thing, it'd be pork. Definitely be pork. Okay. He was a random vegan. Don't even want to mention his name. You don't want to help him grow. Good, good. Fair enough. Yes, yes. Mm. Yeah, it's probably, I'm not sure about. It may be could be histamine. It just may be a natural sort of thing that you get higher, and the gut lining of young kids isn't the same as adults, potentially. Don't know. Maybe. I'm speculating. Luke. Now that's a lineup. That's what I call a lineup. That brings back memories from a misspent youth, lining up shooters. Shooters and beers. Oh, God, those were the days. It's an acquired taste. And remember, Fablado, you could add additional boron to your diet. You know, there's a bit of, from bone broth. You don't need to buy it only. Yeah, look, looks because it basically vinegar can actually give bone broth a bit of an MSG type effect, and some people just don't like that. So don't use vinegar. I usually don't. I know a lot of other people say it just means you have to do in a slow cooker the bone broth for a longer period of time. That's the only difference. Or use chicken carcasses, things like that. I usually use the chicken carcasses. That's what I do anyway. So that's the easiest way. Instapot. I never tried an Instapot, so that it would be rapid. So that would break down because of the high. Yeah, the only problem with those really high temperature pressure cookers and all that I've got concerned is the actual bone marrow. Because remember, it's primarily MUFA. It's not saturated, but MUFA. And that higher level of MUFA also has one of the, those bonds that are missing there. It's not fully hydrogenated. You don't have all those hydrogens on the carbon sort of closing off all the points of potential oxidation. So even MUFA has a bit of potential oxidation. So if you really cook at a very high temperature, a very long time, I'd be wary of that. So don't know. But then again, if you're having a very healthy diet, the small amount of additional oxidation isn't going to kill you. It's like, let's say you overcook something a bit, you get a bit, it's not going to kill you. So, and I'm just speculating anyway. So you can ignore me. So I could decide. Okay, so Chris says, if there was one thing left, I couldn't decide between oysters, lamb shanks, and beef casserole. Yeah, look, it's hard. I know. Oh, look, I know. In that regard, for me, it's pork. Pork would be because especially those fat pork steaks and the bacon and, oh God, don't get me started with bacon. And that's probably the reason why. Daniel's got cheese on his mind. Yes. Yeah, I love raw dairy, and I love cheese and all that. But at the same time, you have to consider the nutritional profile, all the other parts to it. So, if you've got to survive, you're not going to survive. Well, cheese isn't too bad, actually. Dairy isn't too bad. But you still need some meat. You still need some meat in the diet. Even the Maasai have some level of meat, and organ meats and stuff like that. It's not all milk only. Yeah, I think you still need some level. What's Luke asking? Harry, I've seen a lot of people proposing that gluten, exogenous in grains, may have caused a shift in human behavior. What's your take on this? A shift in human behavior. You mean mental behavior, I suspect? Yep, it can have. It probably comes from the thing that you're having compared to the traditional grains like zeta bread in ancient Greece up until the early part of the 20th century. Those had about 1/10 of the gluten that today's hybridized and modern sort of grains have. So the quantity is much higher, and it could have some sort of neurological type effect through. Yeah, you've got a connection between the gut and brain, and there is some literature which sort of says that second brain in the stomach, in the gut, it's communication with the other brain, the larger one. There's some sort of interaction there, but nobody's really proven any sort of mechanism. I mean, I know that gluten isn't really good for the gut lining, can actually damage it and cause gut permeability. But in terms of its neurological type effects, the jury's still out. We haven't really nailed it. People that have got like epilepsy, people that have got things like schizophrenia and certain types of ailments, they seem to get worse when there's gluten in the diet. So there is anecdotal evidence there, but exact causal relationship, because a lot of these are sort of association epidemiological studies on these people, we don't really know, is it the gluten in the diet of that mixed diet, or is it something other in the diet that's actually affecting these people that have got epilepsy and schizophrenia and some of these, and bipolar and stuff like that. So yeah, there hasn't been a pure study looking at bipolar, schizophrenia, and these sort of mental disease to really pin down whether there is a clear causal effect. And then, some of the other effects, which is sort of these glycemic shocks and all that, which is the sugar type insulin going up and down all the time, that could be a relationship as well. But yeah, if somebody's got science that can actually really mechanistic science that can actually show the mechanisms for this, please let me know, because I haven't seen any, and I've looked around in these sort of realms. So it's like saying, I will see if I can send you some material. Look forward to it. Reports on grains induced psychosis. Yes, psychosis. Yep, I have never heard that gluten causes psychosis or can induce psychosis, or no idea. But I'd be very interested. There may be certain people with certain genetics that may be more susceptible and vulnerable. That's a possibility. I don't know. I've got no idea. I've never heard of this sort of condition, but it's a possibility. I mean, a lot of these anti-nutrients can have certain biochemical effects in the body. Exactly what they're doing hasn't been pinned down. Yeah. So yeah, but I bet I'd look. Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate if you could send that information, because that would really be interesting. I would find it very interesting anyway. So, the lower temperature to preserve the jelly. Okay, so it's not a high pressure type. So, yep, not an issue. It's not a high pressure type thing. But you can actually have it at a lower temperature and lower pressure as well, or it's got a higher pressure but lower temperature, I suspect, which is what Kitty said earlier. So if it's a lower temperature, it's probably not as much of an issue. So yeah, but I just don't know enough about these instant pots and what their effect on the fats, proteins, and other substances in food. If anybody knows of any research on instant pots and their effects on the food itself, I'd be interested. Yeah, I sort of, the longest I've probably done is about nearly that, but most of the time I do about anywhere between 24 hours, sometimes 36 hours, but mostly 24 hours. It's just I'm lazy. I can't be bothered waiting that long. And I usually use carcasses which are softer bones and stuff like that. So 24 hours is more than enough. So, speaking of pork, seems microscopic raw pork after sugared cola is poured on top. Not a good. A lot of people denying the image are real. I think there's reasons meat should be cooked to specific internal temperatures. Yep, pork, in particular, pork and things like can be an issue, especially if you even the sort of even pastured pork could potentially be an issue as raw. I've never eaten raw pork. I always cook it. So I'll have it lightly. I may not cook it, I'll never have it rare, but I'll have it sort of medium rare, sort of somewhere halfway between rare and medium, sort of where you've got enough cooking to guarantee that any potential pathogens are being killed off, but without overcooking the meat. So you'll get a very tiny amount of redness. It's very, it's not even discernible as much, which means it's been enough temperature through that to kill anything that could potentially cause issues. But that's how I cook it. I'm not prepared to take any risks. Yeah, I do not buy pork from other parts of Australia. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there are issues with, especially things like Queensland and New South Wales. Nah, no thanks. I buy from southern Tasmania, and it's all pastured, free range, pastured, organic, and it's safe. So I definitely avoid other parts of Australia because I just don't know. At least down here, the producers, I know that they are far better in their production methods. So I'm lucky in that regard, being in Tasmania. But yes, I'd have to agree with you. It's like parts of Greece. I'd be concerned. I'd probably cook the pork far more just to be on the safe side. No, wouldn't take the risk unless you've grown it yourself and you really know what condition the animal's in. So Cheryl said, I grew up not eating pork due to religious reasons, probably Jewish. They believe it was dirty meat. However, that could have come from a rumor from the fishermen, potentially. Look, different populations. Parts of the world, like especially the Middle East and stuff like that, those sort of environments were just not conducive for those sort of animals. And a lot of those animals, like especially pigs, have a tendency of going into water holes and places like that and wreaking havoc. So they weren't things that people wanted around. Because at least with sheep, goats and all that, they're much easier to manage and less of an issue in terms of, affecting the water quality, especially when you're in an arid environment like the Middle East where there's not a lot of water. And this dislike for pork within that region has nothing to do either with the Muslim faith or the Jewish faith or whatever. It predates. So these populations avoided eating pork before these religions even existed. All that happened is they incorporated into their religions because it was already their tradition. I'll give you another example. All other Christians, including Greek Orthodox Christians, don't what is it called? What is it? I'm trying to think about it. I've got a mind block. It's when you cut the skin part off the penis. It's not. But if you look at Ethiopian Orthodox Christians, they do. They do exactly the same tradition as the Jews and the Muslims and all that. Why? Because it reduces the ability for bacterial and other diseases to sort of accumulate under the skin. And because in those sort of areas in the past, because it was sort of the Middle East, that part, the Horn of Africa, was a location where a lot of populations moved out of Africa and were intertwined and moving around that area. And so there was a lot of mixing of different tribal groups or populations and all that, much more prevalent of diseases being transmitted. And I suspect this was a method of lowering that, of sort of reducing the amount of transmissible diseases as a method that was used in that time. So, that even though the same religious faith of orthodoxy, circumcision, that's it. Thank you. Yes. Oops. That's exactly it. Circumcision. Even though we've got the same faith as the Ethiopians in the Highlands, which are Orthodox Christians, we don't practice circumcision, but they do. Again, it's a historical thing, nothing to do with religion, even though the Greek Orthodox religion in that part of the world has adopted it. And they consider it part of their religious practice, even though other Orthodox don't. So there's a lot of things that are in religions that have nothing to do with the religions, but have just been adopted because they're part of the culture. Because it's a way for the religion to basically incorporate itself within the culture. That's why. That's what's happened historically. So it's no different than food preferences or food things. It wasn't compatible to that for that environment at the time, pork in that region. So basically it was removed. See you, mate. Look, in other parts of Australia, yes, it is a problem. But in Tasmania, where I live, I can get access to good quality bacon, and I get smoked bacon, which is pastured, free range, organic. But when I go to the mainland, it's a nightmare trying to find these things. So where in Tasmania, it's easier. Go to the IGA store, and it's just full of these foods. So I've got no problems of accessing good quality pork and bacon in Tasmania. But I usually, if I'm traveling elsewhere, I don't have pork because I don't know the source. I don't know the quality. I've got a lot of question marks, and I usually revert to lamb, beef, to those sort of foods, goat. But yeah, or fish or seafood. But yeah. Okay. Go back to my spot. I've got a slow cooker, and I do enjoy the slow cooker because I can set it, go away for go and do an 8 hours day of work, come back, and it's all done. And so I actually enjoy that. It works for me in that regard. Now that I'm actually working from home, it's not an issue. I don't use it. I haven't used, since I've been working from home, I haven't used a slow cooker at all. I just throw it in, and whether I bake it, fry it, or grill it, that's all I do now. It's quicker because I'm usually just I'll get back to work, and then I'll go back 5 minutes later, turn it over, then go back to work, wait for another 5 minutes, go back, pick it off, put it on a plate, and eat it. So it's pretty good, easy, quick. Yeah, that's good that it's stainless steel. Yeah, all my stuff is stainless steel. Yes, good to play it safe. What was this? Science on Bias says about the psychosis. There was an early study on keto diets that claimed a subject experienced psychotic break. Actually, I've heard about in terms of some people will not do as well on keto, even though they've got epileptic and psychotic or whatever. They really have to go to the 90%, because there is, for epilepsy, there is a sort of a 80% and 85% version of the diet. It just seems like they have to push it, but then they don't know whether there was other factors in the diet or other things, genetic based, that were driving these sort of things. So yeah, but even once, as you said, it's a very limited, even one person or whatever. What's the difference? It doesn't prove anything. You put them on any diet, maybe they would have been just as psychotic. So, well, at least we know with a keto diet, definitely people reverse, and the carnivore diet, the majority, 99%, see massive reversals, and that's the most important thing. I do long for my beer. Yes. So take off the blinkers. Still missing her alcohol fix. I heard people making continuous bone broths. They fished and spent bones out at night. They added new ones in the crockpot the next day, and would harvest hot, fresh bone broth all day long. Okay. Never heard of that, but whatever works for people. Got a continuous thing. Harry, I'm thinking of trying lamb, which I have access to. It's supposed to be pretty much grass-based. Well, the only inputs that you'll get with lamb when you don't have enough grass is things like hay, which is sort of a low-quality grass, silage, stuff like that. So, which is the stalks of the leftovers that they've sort of grounded after they've taken the harvest. So it's not much of an issue in that regard. But yeah, give it a try. Yeah, look, try the thing. I mean, don't put yourself off beef. Beef is still good. Still got a lot of nutrition. But I always say that if you're coming off a standard diet, if you're coming off especially if you're coming off a vegan vegetarian diet, organ meats, eggs, organ meats, and seafood should be part of the diet because they've got a lot of nutrient density and they can give you a lot of the stuff that your body's missing. Simply put, in that regard. Okay. Mummy still cooking specific foods, which yes, you're sort of locked in, aren't you, to some extent? I understand. Look, I lived at home as a youngster like yourself, and yeah, I remember coming back, whether it was from work, which I was doing part time while I was doing uni, and coming back and stuff like that, and pretty much back in my 20s, whether I liked it or not, there were certain types of foods that were there that were made by mum. It's really hard to get away from that stuff. I understand. I sympathise. Had severe headaches, sleep problems, and behaviour with unmotivated crying, spells of apathy. Had otherwise been healthy before symptoms ceased with gluten removal. So you may be very sensitive to gluten. Some people are. If you're really sensitive, yeah, it seems to in some people really create massive havoc. So one of those rare people, yeah, good reason to give it a miss. Oops. Damn thing moved again, overshot. Okay, so Kate, lamb's line, roast, cook at a high temperature for a short time in the oven. Delicious. You're making me hungry. Yes. I had the day before, that was Friday, for me. I had, how many? It's about 3 lamb chops. I think it was about 350 grams, which is 350 divided by 28.3, which is 1.76. Oh, times. Stupid. What was I doing? Am I doing? Getting it wrong. Let's do this again. Yeah. So 12.35 ounces. So, and that was really nice. So it was not overcooked. It was sort of at a medium rare type. I don't like it rare lamb. I prefer it medium rare. I'll have beef blue or rare. But when it comes to lamb, I prefer just getting that redness in the middle, but I like the outer sides to be cooked. So it's not just a surface, but a bit of depth. And I usually get like these thick lamb chops anyway. So they were nice. I really enjoyed those. That was a nice meal with a bit of feta cheese as well. That was nice. So yes, I knew. So Kate's saying, I have no doubt some people have major gluten problems. Yep. I've never known of people really of either psychosis or really that level of reaction. So I'm surprised, to be honest. Yep. Yes, we are spoiled in Tasmania. We've got good quality stuff. Our beef, we've got a producer in the south that really produces really nice pastured beef, which I buy from as well. I usually get it from three sources, either from producers up in Smithton, which is also pastured, off King Island, which is a bit more pricier, and that tends to have more omega-3s. The one from King Island, which is Cape Grim, up in, and it's well known around the world, so it's prized. So I get some of that occasionally. It's not usually I can actually find, especially the rump steaks and all that are quite affordable from the IGA stores. But when they don't have the rump steaks and they've got the all the other ribeyes and stuff like that, they tend to be more pricey. So I go, I look at one, I look at the other, go, nah, I'm going to buy the other one, the one from the south, which also is pastured. So it's the only difference is probably because of the more hardier climate there, you're getting just probably slightly a bit more better profile on the PUFA side on the omega-3s. It's not nothing to write to grandma about, but it's just slightly better. But you're paying a few dollars extra per kilo, so it's sort of in that regard. But yes, we are spoiled. Yeah, I suspect it'll be probably an observational study. A lot of the stuff, it's like all the other keto bashing type studies. They're all observational crap. None of it's clinical. None of it's randomized control. Whenever you do a randomized control, all these arguments go away. That's why they don't do them. Yep, they are. They're great slow cookers. I really enjoy them. I don't have an air fryer, so I can't even comment about air fryers. But I don't know. People let me know whether the meat tastes better with an air fryer. I sort of don't know. Does it dry? Does it dry it out too much? Potentially. Do you not know any comments about air fryers? An Aussie traditional shell. It's an Aussie tradition. Yeah, about the barbecue. Gotcha. Red meat. Yeah. Yeah, things like put another steak on the barbie. Stuff like that. I think prawns as well. Actually, I love seafood, just barbecuing seafood as well. especially scallops with a roe on it. Oh, God almighty. My next door neighbour actually got me a whole bag of a kilo once when I was having a barbecue with a couple of mates, and we just cooked all these scallops. Oh, that was beautiful. So, yes, it's great being down in Tassie. And it didn't even cost me much. What was it, about 20 odd bucks for a whole bag full of it? That was just down from Margate in the south of Tasmania, which isn't very far, Margate. So, yeah. So Kate's off. You're welcome, Kate. See ya. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I've got work tomorrow as well. It's Sunday here, but it's only 1:30. So, yep. That's the thing you should. Yeah, they're great, and we've got really good scallops down here. So, do enjoy them. Try and get them with a roe on, because you get that. You'll get with roe. You'll get additional vitamin C. You'll get all these other nutrients as well. So yeah, if you can get them. Yeah, the shrimp on the barbie. I was about to say it. I sort of got sidetracked with all that, with the questions, and forgot to say it because we're focused on a whole lot of meats, not on the shrimps. But not the prawn on the barbie; it's the shrimp on the barbie. Yeah, I know. Losing it. It must be after all that vegan thinking. It affected my brain cells. Anyway, we're getting close to the end. We've got about 4 minutes. My StreamYard account is nearly maxed, so I'm nearly maxed at my allocated time for the month, because there was an additional weekend this month, unfortunately. So if anyone wants to get anything, final in, any really question where they really want quickly answered, it's just a small little sack, which is like a sort of a really light orangey yellowish type sack on the white part, just sitting on top. Let me just see if I should be able to find it and show you exactly what it is. Looks like. Oops. There they are. Okay. Let me just share that quickly. So you can actually see here are the sort of scallops you would normally get, which are just like that or like this shown. See that little orangey little bit there? That's the roe. That is the roe right there off the scallop. For some bloody reason, when you actually go to get supermarket ones, they take the roe off. But the ones that I get from Margate in the south, it's actually the processing company, and they actually produce. They it's their own local brand. It's not the stuff that they do sell some stuff to the big producers that actually then produce the stuff for the supermarkets, but this is their local stuff, and they actually package it and sell it locally to specialty stores and stuff like that. luckily my next door neighbor, because where she works, one of the people that work in her work environment has a friend and they've contacted that person. That person comes from Margate to Hobart to their work site and actually brings them all these packaged, scallops. And I pretty much, Lynn, she'll basically tell me and say, the guy's going to bring some scallops around next week, and I'll say, well, get me some, and I just give her some money, or I say I just basically pay her account directly and send her the money, and she just basically gets me the product, which is great. So yes, I've got some really good neighbours that are very accommodating in that regard. But that's what it looks like. Get a bigger picture. Yeah, so that's it right there. Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. They take it off because it looks better for sale. It just, because the row sort of makes it look a bit not as, it doesn't present in the way they think that it should be sold. It just shits me. They get rid of they throw away good nutrition just to make it look just crazy stuff. What can you say? Yeah, definitely. Gluten is nasty stuff. So Chris's dad used to catch them. Okay. That's exactly right. Yes, I've sort of grown up pretty much with scallops and with the roe on it. That's how we get them in Tasmania. But if you go to the mainland, like Melbourne, Sydney, the big cities, and you try and buy it, they've removed all the roe. Some of the best nutritional part of the damn thing. Just crazy stuff. What can I say? In the US, you can't even get scallops with more than just the round muscle, no shell even. Yeah, look, that's it's unfortunate. And the other thing is with a lot of seafood in the US, especially in the the Gulf of Mexico, there's a number of areas there where the waterways or the water around those sort of areas is quite polluted and problematic. And there's also the potential, if you don't cook these sort of crustaceans well enough, that you could actually get some sort of disease, some sort of infection, and some bacterial illness, and potentially even die, I've heard, which is pretty bad stuff. We're down here. You're safe. You can just cook it lightly so you don't destroy a lot of the nutrition. It's very, very lightly. Put a bit of butter on top. Oh, it's magic. Making me hungry. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Same crazy stuff. It's just the way we treat food now. It's all about presentation, not nutrition, unfortunately. It's just that sort of reality. It's a crazy world that we live in that regard. So it's sort of, I was going to say something. So, the other thing I forgot to mention, I've been a good boy. I haven't had ice cream. Neither. So I did stop my ice cream last week, and I haven't had any ice cream this Saturday. I found a solution. You know me, I'd have to find a solution to satisfy myself. And what I do is I actually use this low sugar jelly. It's gelatin jelly. So it's got 0. Per serving. So for the whole satchel, it's got 0.1 grams of glucose type sugar. It's not sugar, but glucose, carbohydrate, 0.1 in each satchel, and 1 point, which is all the sort of the gelatinous type glycine, glutamic acid, all these sort of types of amino acids. It's got 1.7 in the satchel, and that's it. It's basically, the rest of it is you put it in, you dilute it with water and stuff like that. And after an hour that I have it in the fridge, I actually put 50 grams of cream, mix it in, and it makes 2 portions because I'm a glutz. I'm a guts when it comes to this, which comes out, the whole bowl comes out to about 200 calories. So if in the evening, like tonight, Sunday, tonight, but yesterday, Saturday, I actually had half a bowl, and it was really nice, of jelly with cream mixed up. So what I do is I put the cream in later, about an hour later. It's been in the fridge, mix it up and stir it, and then let it settle, and it combines because it crystallizes. I'll actually show you what it looks like. So it's my new low keto treat. I'm going back to my keto days now with this sort of thing. So I'm using jelly. I mean, getting connective tissue, getting all the sort of the glycine and all that sort of stuff. So give me a sec. It does have, so that's what it looks like. This is me pulling it apart. I'll just, hold on, leave it there. Oops. So you can actually see that it's gone right through. It's a jelly with cream. This is one that's got, what's it? Pineapple. So it's a pineapple thing, but you have to leave it in the fridge for about an hour. And then on the, after the hour, you take it out, you stir it, and it basically just solidifies. That's just cinnamon on top of it. I want a bit of cinnamon. My only plant indiscretion. And so you can actually see this, like it's a jelly, obviously, but it's a jelly with actually where you've incorporated. I'll put it back in the fridge. Give me a sec. And so you've incorporated and it's one way of actually doing it, that you can have a treat without having ice cream, without having all this sort of stuff, and it's basically the majority, because I use a cream which has got very little carbohydrate in it, and very little protein. It's got about 42.8% is cream. So it's a very thick cream. So when you combine that, it's basically 90-something% fat. So it's just a fat bomb, but it's not very high. So when you have half of that, because it's so much water and fluid in that, it fills your stomach. You can't actually eat any more than half. So you can't binge, and you're only having 100 calories, which is nothing. So it's a good treat without, it's one way of avoiding ice cream. Look, you could add vanilla if you wanted to the jelly, vanilla extract. You could do all sorts of things. That's true. You could change the composition, all that. You basically, it's got very few calories. The majority of calories are coming from the cream, and you can actually put less cream. You don't have to put for the whole bowl, which is about a liter. You don't have which is the whole quantity, because I usually put 2 satchels. I do about a liter, 500 mils for each treat. But it's only 100 calories, which is nothing. So that's it's an easy treat without But the vanilla extract, I didn't think of that. I may have to try and see how it combines. I'll get back to you on that. And I add fresh blueberries in season and splash vanilla beans out of season, but also throw in some chocolate, peanut butter, whey protein, and cocoa in the mix. Whatever makes you happy. But I sort of try to stick it to that it's an occasional treat that I have on the weekends, and it will just basically stick to that and nothing more. And it brings down that caloric. I'm trying to push myself back into ketosis and lose some weight that I've accumulated while I'm working from home, and having a fridge very close by, which isn't a good thing. So I sort of have to try to force a bit of getting rid of some of these indiscretions. Let's put it that way. Look, we're all human, and we succumb to these sort of behaviors. It's probably not as extreme as Bart's with his pizza and beer, but my vice is ice cream. All my friends know that, but at least I've found an alternative. Which, and what did my friend say yesterday? Well, you can always throw a bit of ice cream in there, and I'm going, that defeats the whole purpose. Because he goes, you know what really would go well? We were walking back to my dad's place, and he goes, really well with that, if you stuck half a tub of ice cream on top of the jelly and mixed it in, that would be perfect. I'm going, that's interesting. Heavy whipped cream, vanilla, egg yolk, and xylitol. I wouldn't bother with the xylitol, but and I wouldn't put it. Obviously, the xylitol is basically to balance out the sort of the bitterness of the vanilla. But I'm actually thinking, maybe a bit of cream with egg, mixing it up, and then combining it with a jelly. That would be interesting. I'll have to try that. Yeah, I'll let you know what it ends up like. That's just on the fly, me thinking on the fly. Anyway, I'm getting to the 3 hours and 15 minutes where I'll probably drop out. So, guys, great having you on. Thanks. Take care. I appreciate all the support, and hope to see all of you next week. Same time. See yous. Have a good day. and a good weekend for those in people in North America who are still in their Saturday. And that was, and Chili says, and the xylitol makes it creamy when frozen. Okay. So I should actually try to use a bit. Okay. I'll have to experiment and see how it actually ends up combining without having to go down the ice cream way, but using the sort of the cream, all this sort of stuff. So yeah, thanks. Look, appreciate any input to keep me mentally happy. Appreciate it. Take care and thanks, guys. See yous. Bye.